today because that's a whole nother video we're going to do down the road. So we're going to talk about people who are basically a W-2 employee and have unemployment, or they have overtime, bonuses, commission, hourly. So we're not going to get into the 1099s and the people who own businesses because that's a whole nother hour-long video. So we're going to talk basically about that, but we are going to cover conventional, FHA, VA, a couple different aspects of how they handle like maybe disability income. We're also going to talk about job gaps for each one of those. We're going to leave out the non-QM income calculation today and do another video on that another time. So this is very generic, general, and these things can be interpreted because I've just recently, there's been a new rule change, and I'll talk about it in a second. So let's talk about income first, income calculation. Let's talk about the most generic. Let's say you get salary. You've been working for the last 2 years, same job, and you got a salary, and it's $72,000 a year. It's real simple. Divide that by 12, that's $6,000 a month. That's your income. We're going to calculate your debt to income ratios off of that. If you're going conventional, 50%. If you're going FHA, 56. You're going in VA, we're going to 65, maybe a little higher. So we'll go right off of that income, and there's going to be no variance if that's your only job. It's as easy as it gets. I'm happy as can be when I get one who's just like that. When it gets complicated is when you start having shift time, overtime, bonus, all sorts of unique types of pay. And if you look at these pay stubs, that's where a lot of loan officers make a mistake, is they'll look at the borrower's pay stub and not realize that they got to be careful. They don't look at the pay stub. They actually look at the W-2 and they glance at the pay stub, but they don't realize that there's a bunch of different variable income, and you might not have got it 1 year and you might have got it, recently. So what the rule is in general is if you have additional income on your pay stub, you should have a 2-year average of it, or you can't use it. Now I'm going to put a little asterisk there because I just recently heard that overtime and commission, they can look at 1 year. I have to confirm it. It's a new rule. It's a new kind of thing coming out where they'll just take 1 year commission, 1 year overtime. I am not convinced that that's true yet, but let's put a little asterisk there. So let's pretend with the old rule, if you've been commissioned, let's say you got $10,000 in commission on top of a base salary in 2021, and then you got $20,000 commission in 2022, and your year-to-date commission is $30,000 for 2023. They're going to average, and they're going to do the best they can to do a 24-month picture of your commission. So they're most likely going to average around $20,000 for 2022 and around $30,000 for 2023. But they're really going to take a little bit off of 2023 because we're not done with 2023. We're only in October. So they're going to go back into the last couple months of 2021 and use that $10,000 and try to calculate it the best they can. And they're going to average it. Now, if your commission in 2022 was $300,000 and your commission in 2023 is $5,000, they're not going to use it because you're declining so much. If they will use it, they might use the $5,000 at best. They will not average declining commissions when it's by a certain percentage, usually a 10%, sometimes 20%. Again, another judgment call by the underwriter, depending what you do, what the season was, what's been going on in the world. There's always
Alex?
Yeah, go ahead.
If there's too much of a decline, the underwriter might completely eliminate that.
Yes, underwriters can always eliminate whatever they want on this. So again, this is a general rule. So you don't want declining anything ever. You always want everything going up when it's commission, when it's overtime, when it's bonus. They're always it's always the worst case scenario. Every single time, assume the worst case scenario. And
I would like to jump in and talk about a deal that I recently closed that kind of complements what you're talking about right now. So I have a guy who has 3 jobs in the last 2 years. All 3 of his jobs are a combination of base pay or hourly wages. He gets 40 hours a week plus bonus and overtime. The difference is that the job that he's at now, he's actually making slightly less on the base pay, but more on the bonus and the overtime. The problem is that he was under the assumption that you could calculate, his current bonus earnings, which have been for like 8-9 months, as his actual income. And you got to understand that underwriters are always going to err on the conservative side. So we had to collect. I had him gather, in addition to getting his verifications of employment, he got me his year-end jobs, or when he left the jobs, the ending pay stub, so we could see what the numbers were. And in his case, we did a 2-year average of the bonus. Even though that his bonus is significantly more now, you still have to do that 2-year average. So if I could leave you with anything here, underwriters are always, they may be aggressive in some areas, but they're going to be conservative on income.
Right. So let me tell you, let's stick to the 2-year rule, and I got to look into this, and I'll update everybody on my YouTube channel about the rule. But let's stick to they're using 2-year commission. If you're a vacuum salesman in 2022 making $100,000 commission, and now you're a car salesman, your commission's 100,000, they will not blend that. They will not consider that a 2-year average because it's 2 different careers. So keep that in mind too. So, and if you are getting a bonus this year and it is $10,000, you better have gotten a bonus last year. And these underwriters have a way of figuring everything out. So what they usually do is they send a verification of employment to all your employers, and there's a breakdown of base salary, commission, overtime, bonus, other. And that's where they're going to look at everything, and that's where they're going to decide what your income is. So to calculate someone's income, for me, who has complicated pay stubs and different types of shifts and overtime and Saturdays and Sundays is double time, and it gets real complicated, is I can't get a verification of employment from you guys that quick. It takes a couple of days. I need a signature from you. So what I do is I ask for the last pay stub in 2021, so December 31st or December 20th, whatever the last pay stub is, and I ask them for the last pay stub of 22, and I look at your current pay stub, and I can do my best calculation by looking at all those different things. So if I see something that says car allowance, but then I don't see it the next year, I'm not going to use that. That's not, there's not 2 years of that. Or there's all sorts of shift +2 overtime. I've seen that on a paycheck stub. I see, if I don't see that line item on the next year, I can't use it. I can only use the same line items with the same names. And sometimes some line items will be bunched into the under one category, like commission or bonus or overtime, but I need the employer to do that. So I'm conservative when I see these things. So that's very complicated. Go ahead.
How about adding back in holiday pay and PTO back into base pay? Do you do that?
It depends. What I do, if they're completely hourly and it looks like their pay stubs show consistently 40 hours every week, I will use their hourly rate and multiply it by 52 weeks, and I'll assume that the holiday might be in there. So they usually they'll cover the holiday. So that's how I calculate hourly. So that's another thing. When you're telling a loan officer how much you make, and then you provide the pay stubs, and there's a lot of 50-hour work weeks, and they say, hey, did you do this last year? You want to give them a good estimate if you can't come up with a pay stub. Let's say you don't have access to a good online pay stub system from your previous job or last year's pay stubs. You can come up with the best idea, because what the underwriters can do is they're going to average all those hours. This is what they do. They take the average hours over the last 24 months and multiply by your current pay at the 1.5 overtime rate. So it's really complicated. So if you made $10 an hour base, and then you had 500 hours overtime at $10 base at 1.5 times, this is going to get confusing. And now your base is $20 an hour and at 1.5, and you did 500 hours. This is what they're going to do. They're going to average the 2 years of 500 hours of overtime, which is the same, but they're going to go off your new salary at 1.5 times, which is $30. 1.5 times $20 an hour is 30. And they're going to divide that by 12 months. And then they don't care about, they're not going to average your base salary. They always go off your current base. So remember, a base salary on an hourly, go ahead.
No, I was just, they're always going to go off current base.
Yeah. So when you're an hourly employee and you made $10 an hour last year, now you're making 20, that's good, because we're going to take 40 hours a week if you work 40 hours a week times the $20 an hour. And then we're going to take the $500 average per year and calculate at 1.5% if that's your overtime rate. And that's how they're going to get your income calculation. And everything's done in monthly terms. So when I talk $500 hours a year, I'm going to times that by $30 divided by 12 months, add that to your income. And then I'm going to take your hourly of $20 an hour times 40 times 52 weeks is around $42,000 a year. I'm going to divide that by 12. I'm going to add the overtime plus the base hourly rate. And that's how we're going to calculate your monthly income. And then we're going to do the DTI off of that. So
Alex, let me add something to what you're saying. So
sure,
you're getting pretty deep in the weeds here, which
very deep.
we understand it.
I
But
understand.
if somebody's got several streams of income, variable income being bonus and overtime, whatever, the most important thing is, or one of the most important thing is, we have to get an accurate handle on what your income is. So the more information you can give us, year-end pay stubs, W-2s, don't tell the whole story, is going to help in making sure we're pointing you in the right direction to qualify for something. We don't want to send you off and all of a sudden the income get pulled back, you don't qualify for the property.
Yeah, we're on your side. We are your friend. Don't
Totally.
Yeah, if you tell us something and we say, okay, that doesn't mean you got to score on the goalie. We are not the goalie. The underwriter's the goalie, okay? And those underwriters are evil. And we are your friend. So you want to be as conservative as you can, because everybody seems to want to push to their maximum purchase price. And the last thing we want to do is write your pre-approval. We have faith in you. You sound believable to us. We go with what you're telling us because we don't want to call you out. And we write you the pre-approval, and then we find out in underwriting, oh my God, they had to chop your income a little bit. Your DTIs now, you got to pay off credit cards. We got to buy the rate down. Oh my gosh, we're scattering.
Right.
We are your friend. We don't want that nightmare to happen during the underwriting process. So income calculation, even for the best of us, I've been doing this 27 years. I make mistakes. It's one of the hardest things to get your head wrapped around when it's complicated. If your salary, I won't make a mistake. I can divide by 12. But when you get
not only is it difficult, it's even sometimes more difficult to get the underwriter on the same page with you. So the more information you have to back up how you arrived at your number, the more of an argument you have with the underwriter. But like Alex said, these underwriters get stubborn, and if they're using a number less than you, it's like you're approaching the bench with a judge, and it's difficult, but it can be done. But you have to have all your ducks in a row.
And just so you know, when you're hourly and I see your pay stubs and it says 40 hours, 40 hours, 40 hours, the whole month, I asked for 30 days worth of pay stubs. I've been known to make this mistake. You might have worked 20 hours, 20 hours, 20 hours, a couple, 3 or 4 weeks during the year, and it could disqualify what the income is I can use. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the verification of employment. You might have just happened to work 40 hours the last 30 days, and I'm using 40 hours, but you work variable hours. So you need to tell us those types of things, because you might work 20 hours a week, because the loan officer is supposed to do what we're supposed to do. When we get so busy, we're supposed to look at your hours worked per year, divide it by the amount of days there is in the year to make sure that you're averaging 40 hours a work week. But sometimes we get a little hasty. We trust you. We submit the loan, and then you get denied because we made a major mistake. You can't trust us. We don't go to jail if we make a mistake. We can ruin your life. It's a horrible business we're in. We could make you think you're moving into your dream home, and I could have made a complete mistake. And now your landlord, you told your landlord to go shove it up, whatever. And now you think you're moving in a week, and then we can't close your loan. So we are on your side. We need to work as a team. You and the client we have to be honest with each other that what's going on, because sometimes we make mistakes. When we ask you questions, don't think that if you've got it by us, then you got it by the whole system, because we make mistakes.
Let me add something to what you're saying as well. I've been doing this for 32 years, and I have confidence in my ability to calculate income like Alex. But I have no problem if somebody's kind of out in front of their situation thinking, oh, hey, I want to buy a house. I want to be in a house by February, to submit the loan to what we call TBD, or to be determined, just to get on the same page with the underwriter as the income. Because I think if you're on the same page there, a lot of the other stuff just kind of flows, or you can handle it. But to be on that same page, you're pre-qualifying them, you're budgeting them correctly.
Yeah. So income types and how you get paid are usually the number one mistake a loan officer is going to make. It's like, that's going to ruin your deal. Besides background checks that we have nothing to do with, like they'll find a judgment or foreclosure against you. Those are the big killers. But where a loan officer makes mistakes is calculating income. So be as upfront.
They like you said, they kind of glance at the W-2s. They don't take enough of a deep dive into it that an underwriter is going to do. And we as loan officers have to think like underwriters. And unfortunately, the way most of us think like underwriters is the mistakes that we've incurred in the past.
Yeah. And when you switch jobs and you have variable income, that's when it gets really complicated. So let's say you work at McDonald's, this is going to be the easy one, and then you switch to Burger King. That's very similar careers. that's easy to understand that you can blend the overtimes and the bonuses, but you switch 3 jobs, 4 jobs in a 2-year window, and some had overtime, some didn't, some had bonuses, some didn't. That could get really complicated for the loan officer. So when they're asking you clearly, what was your base at this job? How many hours overtime do you think you work? I mean, you're not going to know exactly either, but unless we hit all the documents in, we're guessing at that point, because you have multiple jobs, some you can blend, some you can't. You can't average, like I said, a vacuum salesman commission with car sales. It's not the same field. They don't go together. It's oil and water. So sometimes when
Alex,
yes.
Can we jump? I think we've touched on this variable income pretty good, and
all right.
To summarize it, it's got to be examined thoroughly, and we can only come up as loan officers with the number, with the information that provided. But let me lead you into another category, if you don't mind. Absolutely. Interruptions in employment. COVID wasn't too long ago. A lot of people were out of work temporarily. They went back to work, and maybe at the same employer, the same field. Let's talk a little bit about if somebody had a gap in employment, an interruption in employment. How long do you have to be back to work in relation to how long were you at work prior to the interruption?
All right, so I'm going to give you the 3. Well, this is my best take on this. So when it comes to employment gaps, FHA's got the clearest, there's no real variance to it. It's A plus B equals C. And when it comes to FHA, if you've been working, so you have to verify 2-year work history sometime I'm going to use 10 years because I've gone back even 11 years. And the underwriter said, I've never done 11 years before, but I'll do an 11-year gap. And that was like, I couldn't believe that they went with it, but they did. So let's just use 10 years. Let's say you are a housewife and you worked, let's go back to McDonald's. You worked at McDonald's from 2000 to 2013. And then you had a bunch of kids and you haven't worked since. And now your kids are 13, they don't like you, it's time to go back to work. So you go back to work and you've been back on the job for 6 months. In the FHA guidelines, it says if you're off for more than 6 months, you have to be back on for 6 months. And you can go back far back into your history for that 6-month gap. And that gap can be 3 years, believe it or not. So if you're back on for 6 months, as long as it's a salary or a 40-hour work week hourly, I mean, you can do 38. If your work weeks are 38 every week and you're full-time, but you can't do commission for 6 months, you can't do overtime, you can't do 1099, you can't do self-employed. It has to be a salary full-time job, either by hours or by just a straight salary. That's the key. So if you're off for less than 6 months, you only have to be back on the job for 30 days. But again, you have to go back prior to the gap and verify 2 years history in a row. So you always have to have a 2-year history of FHA somewhere in your life. Now, if you're a student and you're studying nursing and you graduate with a nursing degree and you start a job 1 day later as a nurse, I can use that. If you take 6 months off looking for a job, that's fine. You can start right away. So it starts getting nice. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're somebody coming out of college and you get a nursing job, as you in your example, can you close on the loan with the offer letter only, or do you need at least one pay stub?
So I just found out today that we have an investor that will do an offer letter with FHA. I've always thought you need a pay stub and a verification of employment. You got to start your job. So we have a new investor. And I don't know if it's a guideline change. I meant to call around. You can do an offer letter on FHA as long as it's salary again, not commission. And if you do an offer letter, you have to start that job. So the offer letter has to have your income, the start date, and as long as that start date's within 60 days of the closing, it's just like conventional, you can use that offer letter. It has to be an uncontingent offer letter. They can't say you still have to pass the drug test. It can't say we still have to do a background check. We can't say you still have to pass an exam to make sure that you're sane. There's all sorts of contingencies on these offer letter. It's got to be an uncontingent, no conditions. So
I'll tell you, my tendency is to tell people that I want to see one pay stub because you know what I mean?
Dale, I've been telling people to stay at a Holiday Inn for a month when they move from one state to another, because that's the guideline that I was trained on until 2 days ago when I was trying to push a guy through a conventional. He had a 690 credit score and it wouldn't approve him. No matter what, I could not believe my eyes. He had nothing wrong with his credit. Conventional has gotten really tough. It wouldn't approve them. I called the rep, and because on the findings of the DU findings for Fannie Mae, it said if you add rent to this file, it might get an approve eligible. And there's a special way to add it that our lenders have to do it. We can't. It's called an NOA, a notification of assets, that it comes along with the verification of rent that goes on the credit report where it reads it like DU. It's almost like a Experian Boost, but the lender has to add it. They have to do it through the credit bureaus. And when the lender adds that rent history for conventional, it might get approved. And we were struggling with it. He was trying to find out how to do that. We were trying to figure it out. I heard about it. I've never done it. And he said, why don't you just go FHA? And I said, well, because he has an offer letter. He starts November 15th. And that's, it's October, whatever, 10th. And he's like, wait a second. And he looks at his guidelines. And he pulls up his FHA guidelines, and it said, we can take an offer letter 60 days. And I was like, what have I been doing to my customers for the last 5 years? And then I know that, Dale, that our investors are requiring that, at least one pay stub. And I don't know if this is a guideline change or a special thing that this bank is doing. And I can't say the name of the bank on TV. I don't want to get sued. But we have an investor that does it. So if you have, but it's not a 500 credit score bank. So if you have a good credit, we got a bank that can do an offer letter for FHA now. And
Alex, let me give you an example of, I don't know if Rhonda's on the call. It's a deal that Rhonda and I are working on. The borrower is a traveling nurse, makes very good money, and she's also going to school to become a nurse practitioner. So she was required for, I don't know, a 5 or 6 month period that she could not travel because she had to go on campus to class 2 or 3 days a week. And during that time, she was unemployed. But prior to that, she was 2 years solid. And the underwriter, she went back to work in April of this year. When the underwriter was calculating income recently, the underwriter was calculating her income as if she was working for the full year and dramatically reducing what her actual wages are.
that's wrong.
What are your thoughts on that?
That's completely wrong. I would have fought that one.
I agree.
Yep. I would have fought that one tooth and nail.
Well, I did. I mean, we finally got him to approve it, but I mean, we had to fight it hard because it's not an accurate reflection of what her base wages were because she wasn't working the first 3 months of the year.
Right.
And it was her numbers year to date are very in line with her previous numbers before she had the interruption.
So everybody out there, you can see how brutal income calculation, job gaps, rules of employment. It's just so complicated. We think it's like knowing IRS code when we're on the phone with you. It's like, it's crazy what we have to remember and get right. And so that's why we need your help, to be honest with us. So this is crazy stuff. But let's go on to the job gap. So the FHA is basic, 6 months off, then you'd be 6 months back on, less than 6 months, just 30 days worth of pay stubs, have to prove it to your history. VA, I'm going to tell you, conventional VA would follow that rule basically as long as you don't have a large gap. Now, when you have a large gap, conventional VA start looking for stability. So FHA forgives the word stability. You could be off for 5 years. Now you're back on for 6 months. That's not stable at all. Like, for example, I had a veteran that had a small business for the last 3 years. He made $3,000 a year revenue on his tax returns. He was self-employed. His adjusted gross was $1,000 a year. And then he went and got a full-time job, was at the job for 6 months. They would not take it because they didn't consider a self-employed job a real job. He didn't have stability. They wanted him on the job for 1 year. So the VA does not take 2 years off, 2 years on. Whatever. They want stability, and they're going to analyze that in their own head. Now, VA is usually really forgiving, but the VA wants stability. So if you have a 3-year job gap, I'm going to say you need 1 year back on the job. If you got a 6 month job gap, 6 months back on is enough. So that's where it's going to be an underwriter's call. And I couldn't tell you with certainty what underwriters are going to say. If I call the rep or underwriting manager, they would tell me something, and the next underwriter got it would do something different. So it's that complicated. It's an underwriter's call. They're looking
for discretionary.
It's very discretionary. They're going to look at the totality of the picture. If you're late on things and you got some bounce checks and you're getting all gift funds and your scores barely getting whatever, and you've got all this stuff, they're not going to like it. So they're going to take in the total picture of the file. If you're like 800 credit scores and you got $1 million in the bank, and your new job salary is $300,000 a year, and you've been off for 2 years, they're going to say, wait, this person's safe. He must have some good experience if they're paying him $300 grand a year. He must be a responsible person if he's got $1 million in the bank at 800 credit score. But you got a 502, it's all gift funds, you got some bounce checks, and you were late on everything 2 years ago, but you fit the VA manual under guidelines, so that they might terrorize your job history for not looking stable enough. It's going to be
you got to look at the trade-off with VA. I mean, they go
right.
deep into the well on FICO and very high on debt ratio.
Right. So VA and conventional are going to follow just to make sense kind of a thing. But if you just had 6 months off and you've been working for your whole life, you have 6 months off and 6 months back on, all three of those will take it if there's not anything weird going on, like a large job gap. So they all will follow that. It's a safe rule of thumb. But if you got a large job gap, FHA will take it, and then VA and conventional probably won't take 6 months back on, unless it's a perfect excuse, like you were a nurse and then you had babies, took 5 years off, and now you're a nurse again. That's VA stability for 6 months, and that's conventional stability because you obviously had a degree, you had a career, you had some children. They can't discriminate against that. You're 6 months back on, you're in the same career as before. It all adds up. But so there you go. There's a perfect example of a discretionary call where it would be okay. So Dale, if you want to say anything about this, that's a complicated topic, but that's how we have to judge these calls when we write our pre-approvals.
Yeah, there's some general rules of thumb, as Alex mentioned. You got to be back to work. If you've been off of work for more than 6 months, you got to be back 6 months. Would you agree, Alex?
Yes.
That's just a general rule of thumb, and everything else could be case by case. Like in the nurse example, you came back to work after being on maternity leave. They can't discriminate against you for that. But if you're off for 5 years and you're back for 3 months, chances are you're going to have to be working a little bit longer before you can get qualified.
Yeah. So job gaps also, let's say that you have 6 jobs in the last 2 years and you got 2-month gaps in between each one of them. You got a double whammy there. You got too many gaps in the last 2 years and you got too many jobs. FHA, they don't like that. They don't like your job hopping because they think that you're not employable. There's something wrong with you. You can't keep a job. Now, if you start a job at McDonald's and they pay you $10 an hour, and then you go to Burger King and they pay you 12, and then you go to Taco Bell and they pay you 15, and then you go to Popeyes and they pay you 20, then you can start job hopping like that because you're getting more and more money from the next company. And that's the only reason why you can have multiple jobs in a 2-year window. You can have 3 or 4. You start having 5 or 6, they start saying we don't want this, unless it looks like you're getting an increase in pay every job. Otherwise, you got these job gaps in between. That's not stable. It's not really consistent income. So you want to be back on the jobs for 6 months stably if you got all those job gaps in between, like 5 different jobs, 2 months off, 2 months on, 2 months off. Then you're going to have to be 6 months on for sure.
Stability is a big word when calculating income.
It is. Another thing when it comes to income is, again, I want you to chime in this. I'm not sure. I think that conventional is 125%, but FHA, let's say you have Social Security income. You could take 115% of the gross number because it's not taxable. I'm going to get into something more complicated in a second. VA lets you do 125%. And I believe conventional lets you do 125% too. Now, all three of them require, if let's say that's your only job is just collecting Social Security, then or disability from the VA, then you're good. But if you have a career and let's say you're making 70,000 a year, there's a cutoff. I think it's 35,000 a year income. But let's say you're making 70 grand a year. The underwriter is going to ask for tax returns to see what your Social Security taxable amount is. And they're only going to let you gross up the non-taxable amount. So if your Social Security is 24,000 a year, that's 2,000 a month, but it says 12,000 was taxable and 12,000 was non-taxable. You can only gross up the non-taxable part because your others, because the other part was taxed. Don't ask me why, but that's what they do when you make a lot of money, because they don't want you to be able to gross up that because it's not, there's some rule to it. I don't understand it. Dale, can you?
Well, here, Alex, I'll give you a VA example that I recently closed. I had a gentleman, a veteran, recently divorced and was doing a cash out refinance to get his ex-wife off the house, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the underwriter, he's a disabled veteran, and he had 3 sources of income: Social Security, his VA benefits, and his son's Social Security. The underwriter was questioning whether or not we could gross up the Social Security specifically And so I had to get the tax returns, and the ex-wife's tax income was on the adjustable gross top line of the tax return. And we had to battle, but we finally were able to get through that and establish that none of his Social Security earnings are taxed. And so we were able to gross it up. Right?
Right.
Follow me?
Exactly. So is there any questions out there besides Angeli? No, we have no visitors. So Angeli's got a question. She wants to know about scenario 4, which it appears that when you're in the same field, what income documentations are required, but you switch jobs. So we're always going to need 2 years W-2. We're not here to talk about 1099s or tax returns today, but we're going to need 2 years W-2, 30 days pay stubs from your current job. And then if you have if you work 2 jobs in 2022, I'm going to need 2 separate W-2s. And then if you only worked 1 job this year, I need just 30 days pay stubs. If you work 2 jobs this year, I still only need 30 days pay stubs on the current job, but I'm going to ask for the contact information for all your jobs for the last 24 months. And we are going to ask you for, the bank's going to ask us to do a verification of employment. The verification of employment is a document that breaks down your income. It says that, your start date, your position, how you're paid, hourly, commission, biweekly, are you salary? What was the time of your last pay raise? What's the likelihood you're going to continue there? And it's the Holy Grail. It's the HR department of your prior job and your current job that's going to tell us everything about you. And if there's special notes in there that you took maternity leave, and that's why your pay stubs are off, then the underwriter can make that calculation adjustment why your pay stubs don't match your salary. So things like that pop up. So the documents.
Alex, I'm going to add something to your example. If you had 2 jobs in 2022, let's say, for example, you worked at 1 job until the end of April and worked a second job throughout the remainder of the year, we're going to ask for that last pay stub that you received from job 1 in 2022 at the end of April and the last pay stub in the end of December for job 2. So we can calculate that variable income.
You can do that as variable, but if you're currently salaried right now, I don't care.
Oh yeah.
I just want to know that you were
You don't
working.
care about that, right?
I just want to know you were working and there's no gaps, that you have a 2-year history. That's what we need to know. So we see 2 W-2s. I need to make sure that on the application you were accurate on the dates that you ended the job and started a new one, because we have the job gap issue. But so again, be honest with us. But if your salary, the income I'm going to use is just your new income at your new job. Again, if
your current base pay, your salary, correct?
Yeah. If you're hourly and you got a raise from a year ago, we're going to go off your current hourly rate. So that's a good thing. If you get raises, we can go right off of it on a full-time job. If you're part-time, they average the last 24 months of hours worked and multiply it by your current hourly rate. So that's complicated. So they figure out your hours worked over the last 24 months by sending verifications. When part-time is like less than 32 hours a week, I believe. So if you're like working 20, 25, 20, 25, 22, 21, 19, 17 week off, and what they're going to do is they're going to ask the employers on these verification of employments from the prior years to put average hourly work week, and then they multiply that by 52 weeks, and they do that for each year, and they multiply that by your current pay rate. So if you're making like $3 an hour the last year and a half, but now you're making $100 an hour, then you're golden. We get to use the $100 an hour, but they're going to multiply it by the average hours worked per week that they calculate over the 24 months. Is that good?
Alex, have you ever seen a situation where somebody's been consistently working 40 hours, but then over the last month their hours were declining?
Yep. If you got a good explanation,
and how does an underwriter look at that? Not favorably.
No, you need the HR person to say that there is an issue. They can't say we don't need them anymore because the business is slowing. That would be a deal breaker. You would need something extenuous that's only happened this month and it's not going to happen again. And the HR person at your work has to say that.
Yeah, when there's a decline like that, you're going to need some commentary from the HR person.
Right. So I think this is good enough. I think we've confused the viewers enough today. I mean, we're always available for questions. Dale, you got anything you want to add? Because I think we should wrap this up and then do the next one on self-employed and really confuse the public.
Well, just the final thing I'll say is just try to gather as much documentation on the things that we requested. It's going to help the loan officer give you an accurate representation of your income, and so you're pre-qualified and looking at the right area for a house and not overextending yourself.
And tell us the truth. We're your friend.
Yeah,
This is what I tell people, you guys, customers. I want you to understand. This is what I tell all my customers when I feel like they're not telling me the truth. I said, look, I'm your lawyer. You got a gun in your hand that's smoking. You got blood splattered on your face. You got a dead body at your feet. And I have to prove that you're innocent. And that's how the mortgage starts off. You're guilty of lying. As far as the underwriter is concerned, we're all lying to the underwriter, and they're trying to catch you. And they got all sorts of systems. They got helicopters and drones flying around your house. Not really, but that's kind of what happens. So they have all the tools these days to find. They Google you, they background check you, they look at all these documents through a fine-tooth comb, and they are looking to catch something. Not because they don't like you or me, but that's their job. My job is to close your loan, and I'm on your side. So tell us the truth. If you tell us the truth and we know something could come up, we have ways of like, okay, I can tell a story that we can be prepared for it. We can get around it this way or that way, or we can get more documentation and come up with a story before it happens and we get blindsided by it. So remember that, we are your friends. We are not the person that if you get it through the goal that you scored, because we are on your side. We are just as hopeful to close the loan as you are. We want the commission, you want the house. Underwriter wants to keep her job and she gets fired if she writes too many bad loans. We don't. So keep that in mind. We are your friend. Tell us everything, because if some things won't come up and some things will come up, we know what will come up if you tell us. If you say, hey, I have a judgment and it's for $100,000, it's in the courts, it's all over the place, then I'm gonna well, I didn't see that. Thanks for telling me. There's nothing I could do for you except you can go on a payment plan and then we can come up with a solution. But if you don't tell me that, I write the pre-approval, we get a contract, we submit the loan to the bank, and then everybody thinks the person who sold you the house is buying a house, and that person bought a house from someone who's selling a house. We start this whole domino effect, and I find out the hard way that the underwriter did a background check and found a judgment. Now everybody's deal's in jeopardy. All those people on the line are in jeopardy, and it's all my fault.
It affects a lot of other people.
And it's all my fault because I didn't drill you on that and treat you like you're a criminal and make sure that you told me everything, but just when we ask you questions, tell us the truth. It helps us help you. If we have to say no to you, then you're probably going to know from anybody. If we say no to you, go to someone else, but tell us the truth. So that's my advice to everybody out there. Wait, hold on.
Yep. Be forthcoming.
All right. Can you, I'd like to thank you guys for watching today. Can you please like this video and subscribe? It helps us help you, because the more people that get out there, the more viewers we get, the better it is for everybody. We get more feedback. You can see everybody's comments. So please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, hit the bell, do it all for us. We appreciate it. I want to say thank you guys. Thanks so much.